Welcome, I'm Sam, and today we're going to be talking with James Kennedy here, who is the author of The Order of Odd Fish, and we're all going to be questioning him a little bit on the book, which hopefully he will give us inspiring answers that will all help us understand the universe.
And also, we are interviewing him because on February 7th, which is a Saturday, at this very library, we are going to have a fantasy festival where we will not only have James reading from his book, but we will also be showing his favorite movie, which is Spirited Away.
And there'll also be fantasy manga drawing and fantasy video gaming, and one lucky person will perhaps get their fantasy granted, but that's to be decided later. So let's get started, shall we?
Alright, I'm Luke, and I will ask the first question of James. So James, in this story, Jo finds adventure in a place she least expected to. Do you think that, to an extent, everybody longs for an adventure like Jo's? What was your greatest adventure?
I'm sure everybody longs for adventure. Do you?
Yes, I do.
Probably greatest adventure was when I went to Tokyo for the first time and lived there for a year. Because I didn't know anybody when I moved there, and so I had to make all my friends over again. I had to learn a new language, and I had to work there. And actually, it's kind of like what Jo's adventure, like finding yourself in a new city where everything is alien.
Interesting.
So, on the Japan topic, you were just making a couple of parallels. Do you think your time in Japan greatly influenced the writing of this book?
Yeah, in Eldritch City, there's a lot of festivals and rituals which are inspired by the things that I saw when I was in Japan. Not so much the stuff that I saw in Tokyo, but the stuff that I've seen in the countryside around. And in America, we don't have rituals or festivals or traditions that go back hundreds of years like they do in Japan. And I wanted to write about a place that does have that kind of very, very old, kind of alien, foreign culture.
And in writing the novel, you said that that culture inspired you to write it. What was the first thing that came to you about this novel? Did you have an idea for a character, or what kind of initially sparked this?
This is before I ever went to Japan or anywhere. I was a senior in college, and I had taken a class called Myth and Story, and we had to buy a bunch of books for this class, and one of the books was The Golden Key by George MacDonald. And I was just looking at, and there was an edition with illustrations by Maurice Sendak, and I was so fascinated by this book. Even before I opened it, it just looked like a perfectly designed little book. It's like, I want to write something like this. And so I went home after dinner, and I sat in my room, and I typed up about 20 pages, and that was the seed of a story that became The Cockroach in the Music Box, and that short story, over time, became The Order of Odd Fish.
So, you listen to a lot of music while you wrote it? That's in your soundtrack that you submitted, soundtrack of if this book were made into a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of music do you think inspired you the most writing the book?
When I was actually writing the book, I listened to a lot of Stravinsky, Rite of Spring, in particular. I listened to Mussorgsky, I listened to Bartok, and I also listened to some Gilbert and Sullivan. I found that strangely really in the spirit of the book, and also, but then a lot of bands like Fiery Furnaces or Deerhoof or things like that. I think if this book is like any band, it's like Deerhoof, which is Deerhoof has a Japanese singer, and their song structures are very you don't know where they're going to go next, and yet it still feels like pop songs. There's pop songs in which something is wrong with them, and I like that feeling.
And I'm just curious, if it were a movie, do you think it'd be better as a live-action movie or an animated movie?
Giving it serious thought, and I think I would rather it be live-action, unless it was done by Miyazaki, and then it could be animated.
And I'm Heather, and when I do my writing, I listen to classical music too, but I wondered why you thought classical music was a good thing to have on this.
Since there's no words, it makes it easier to write, and also since the rhythms of classical music are long, you can get into a groove. If you have something that's like pop music, that the rhythms are very short, it's difficult to to maintain concentration, especially if there's like a lot of words coming at you very quickly. I find it difficult to generate my own. Oh, also hosts, the planets, I find really, really good to write to.
Speaking of the Belgian prankster, did you draw upon any character traits from other classical villains in developing him?
Yes. There is a book by G.K. Chesterton called The Man Who Was Thursday, which I recommend to everybody. It's great and it's very short. It was written, I think, around 1910, and it's about this group of anarchists who are all named after days of the week. And this one guy who's a detective is able to, and their leader is Sunday, and this detective is able to infiltrate his way in as Thursday. And then he has to find a way to like overthrow these anarchists. But Sunday is like this, he's like a man, but he's like more than a man. He's like almost like this personification of nature, chaos, and he's really mysterious. And as Thursday works through all the different days of the week, getting towards Sunday, and this book is a really dreamlike atmosphere, and it's especially striking since it's written, so long ago. Sunday is just this terrifying character, and I wanted to have something like that.
So I know this is a very outdated question. I'm sure you've been asked it thousands of times, but if you had to pick one character to be your favorite character of the book, who would it be?
Ken. That's the one that's most like me. And he's the one who's kind of like gotten invited by or got sucked into this city, and then like by no kind of merit of his own, finds a way to succeed in it, even though he does every single thing wrong. And in fact, now at the end of the book, he is a knight of the odd fish, and in the sequel that I'm planning, his problem is like he has to figure out what his specialty is going to be. By the end of that book, I want it to be that he figures out that he's really good at failing, and that becomes his specialty, because like he fails really well. Every time he fails, like something happens that's better than what he originally had thought to do. And I think maybe that's kind of how this book came about. Like I studied physics and I was not very good at it, and so I didn't become a physicist. And then I taught for a little while. I'm not a great teacher. And then I was like, I've been in some bands, but I'm not a really great musician. But by like tasting a lot of different things and failing interestingly at them, it kind of makes kind of a gumbo that you can stir together and get something delicious out of it.
And speaking of the night specialities in the book, what do you think yours would be, as outside of the failing one, as you've expressed interest in?
I wanted to go with that one. The ones that actually exist in the book.
Well, in the book, and one that you would like to have.
I think it would be the one I just mentioned, that the failing. Failing well, because everybody fails all the time. We never really ever set out to do exactly what we aimed for, but then find a way to kind of creatively make use of your mistake to make something even better than what you had planned, I think is a good skill to have. I think I've learned a lot of that in improv. I don't know if, Chicago's a great town for improv comedy, and they teach you how to use those mistakes and things that once somebody does something weird in a scene, everybody else, that seems like it doesn't work, like everybody else in the scene will try to support it and make that weird thing be the center of the scene.
You always have to accept, otherwise nothing will go forward.
Yeah, and so, I just think that in anything creative, it's a really good lesson to learn, to be able to do that.
So have you ever done that, made a mistake and then been able to bounce back with it and make it better?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things in the book that when I first wrote them, if I knew more about how to write a book, I wouldn't have written it that way, because it caused me a lot of problems. I'm like, well, if I put this character in here, then how can I do all this other stuff? And so then the creative ways to get around the problem, I think, enriched the book better than if I'd really known my structure cold starting out.
Well, thank you very much, James Kennedy. We're about out of time, but just go through. My name's Sam.
Heather.
Zoe.
I'm Luke.
And I just want to re-mention one more time that we're going to be having our Fantasy Festival on February 7th. That's a Saturday at the Evanston Public Library right here in the loft. And I just want to say once again, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us.
My pleasure.